I'm Tyler Jones, and coming up on this episode of the Racing Roundtable, I'm going to tell you why Tyler Reddick's Daytona 500 win is one we're going to remember for a very long time.
I'm Dominic, Aragon, and I'm going to tell you why NASCAR got all the officiating calls right this past weekend in Daytona.
I'm at Kemp. I'll tell you exactly why Carson Hocevar is exactly what the sport needs.
Glad to have you with us here on the Racing Roundtable. Jones, Kemp, Aragon here with you. Appreciate y'all stopping by. Got a lot to discuss on today's program as we'll look back on Tyler Reddick's fantastic win in the Daytona 500, bringing home the first ever Daytona 500 victory for 2311 Racing, owned by Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan. We'll discuss all that. We'll look ahead to this weekend's race at Atlanta. We'll go over the top headlines in the sport, and of course, we will have a look at the odds and give you our predictions for this weekend's race at Atlanta as well. Guys, good to be here as always. I enjoyed myself, maybe a bit too much in Daytona. Matt, I got to say this. I know you're the professional race car driver out of all of us on this show, of course.
Pretty generous. Pretty generous of you to say that.
I drove over 1,100 miles on Monday going back home from Daytona to Dallas and going through different, curves in the road and everything. I feel like I was in a race car, like maybe what's next for me, like the Rolex 24 or something, I'm ready to go after surviving 16 and a half hours on the road, man.
Yeah, you weren't far off of it from that 16 and a half hours. I mean, another 8 hours, you're pretty much there. So, one of these times when you go through Daytona, you'll just have to go straight through, watch the race, and drive straight back, and there you go.
I
That's
guess
the way
the
you can
real
beat it
question is
next
how
year.
many pit stops did you have, Tyler? That's the real question.
So I limited myself on the pit stops. I stopped a total, Dom, of 3 times, and we maximized our stops. I say we, it was just me. I was in the car by myself. Where I pulled over for gas, used the bathroom, got food, drink, whatever I needed, and that was it. Just 3 stops in that 16 and a half hour stretch.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
Now, I may or may not have kept a cup in my car that I used to avoid pulling over at times. Some would call that a bit skeptical, but hey, if that saves me from stopping somewhere, whatever it takes.
We
So,
we were plenty impressed. You could have just stopped after,
Yeah.
said 16 hours, 3 stops. So
Next, we're going to hear, Matt, there was a catheter involved. We don't need the details, man.
yeah. Yeah,
okay.
spare us the details, brother.
Let's move on then. Tyler Reddick gets it done in the Daytona 500. He only led one lap, the one that mattered the most, the final lap, to get the Daytona 500 victory. And guys, there's plenty of storylines to come out of this win for Tyler Reddick. And I know much has been made about Michael Jordan, and believe me, we'll get to Jordan and Hamlin and all that in a moment. But let's give Tyler Reddick his flowers here to start things. Tyler Reddick last year was a difficult season. Did not get into victory lane. And the expectations were coming off the season when he was the regular season champion that he would build upon from that previous campaign. And although they were the highest in points among the non Hendrick, Penske, and Gibbs cars, it just wasn't all there. And he was outrun by his teammate, Bubba Wallace, a lot last year. Bubba got into victory lane at Indy, but not him. And, he was dealing with some personal stuff off the track. Of course, we know about all the legal battles that 2311 was going through as well. And we'll touch on that here in a moment. But for Tyler Reddick to, after all the adversity he faced last year, to get into victory lane, to me, was just remarkable. I think he's one of the best drivers in the sport right now. And, for him to, it kind of reminds me, a few years ago when Denny Hamlin had that winless season, and then he started off with the Daytona 500 win the very next year. Like, that was the response that he needed. for himself, for that team. I came away just very happy for Tyler Reddick, and I know that Daytona's a crapshoot, and he didn't dominate this race by any stretch of the imagination. But what a way to get this campaign going for Tyler Reddick, Dom, after having his struggles in 2025.
Yeah, you have the dry spell like you mentioned the year before, the lawsuit looming over everything, your impending future, and I believe a contract year into 2026. I think this is going to soften negotiations and move the leverage back towards Reddick. Steven Toronto, friend of the show, and I know he was out there in Daytona. I don't know if you had the chance to connect with him.
Oh, I ran into Steven several times.
He had pointed out that the right rear quarter panel or the left rear quarter panel of Reddick's car got scraped up from the BJ McLeod crash on lap 4. So something goes wrong there on lap 4, we'd be talking about someone else winning this Daytona 500. So like you mentioned, it's a crapshoot. Could have gone so many different ways, but that's how close the race could have very well ended for the 45 team. But Tyler Reddick has proven time and time again how good he is at super speedway racing, being at the right time, at the right moment, being able to make the right calculated moves. We saw that at Talladega in 2024 when he got his first super speedway win. We saw that this year with Daytona. Last year he was second. He's been in contention for these Daytona 500, so it's not a fluke win by any stretch of the imagination. But as we discussed on the show last week, he was 35-1 to win the Daytona 500. So certainly not a long shot, but at the same point, not an odds-on favorite either. But Tyler Reddick's made a lot of noise, and winning that Daytona 500 will give that team a lot more momentum moving forward.
Matt, as Dom mentions, this one, it felt like kind of came out of left field because he wasn't a contender most of the day. He didn't qualify that great, didn't run particularly well in the duels. And here he is, even coming off the backstretch. Chase Elliott had the run. I think the headlines were already starting to be written. Chase finally gets his first Daytona 500 win. And then all of a sudden, Tyler Reddick gets the run from Riley Herbst. And that's all he needed to get the job done there. I mean, it was pretty impressive what Tyler Reddick did, really just coming out of nowhere.
He really did too. And actually, Dom, to play off your point earlier with getting by the BJ McLeod wreck, he actually drove right through the middle of that big wreck later in the race too. After the 40 car made an aggressive move, and everybody kind of got collected there. And Reddick drove through the middle of that. Looked like Days of Thunder, and ended up coming out on top. Obviously, at the end of the day, and building on that point too, it's really a Cinderella story, kind of. I mean, you talked about how much Tyler Reddick went through last year, but you take it a step further, obviously 23-11 and Denny Hamlin, and it's like all these different stories culminating into a Daytona 500 victory is really pretty cool to look back on.
And I think just
Dom,
speaking of the stories, and Tyler, you were there too, but my gosh, the mainstream media that's covering this now too, because Michael Jordan's team won the Daytona 500. I think there's gonna be a lot more eyeballs moving forward in 2026 on the sport because of who won the race.
yeah, and we'll get to that here in just a second. But as far as Tyler Reddick goes, with having those struggles last year and getting into victory lane in this race, we mentioned it's not a fluke by any means. The guy can win anywhere. I think that going forward from here, Dom, they'll enjoy this victory. But the work has already begun for Atlanta and turning their attention going forward. I think this 45 team is a championship contender that like they got a real shot to win the whole thing. Like this wasn't just a one-off scenario. This team is here to stay to compete with the best of the best.
And look at the races that are coming up too. Again, Tyler Reddick has proven on the super speedway how fast this team can be and where they could be at the right place at the right time. We're going to Coda after that, and we know Reddick is a very good road course racer.
He's won there before.
He's won there before. Mile and a half tracks tend to be bread and butter for 23-11 racing. You got a lot of those sprinkled on early in the first half of the season. And now knowing this new point system too and how momentum based and how important this emphasis is on winning and stage points, this is right up the 45 teams alley. When we get to the time that the chase starts, we're going to be looking at Tyler Reddick seated very high, Tyler. And again, the Daytona 500 victory is only going to just give this natural momentum the team's going to have.
All right, let's shift gears now. Talk about 23-11 and getting this done. We know what happened. The lawsuit, losing the charters. 2.5 months ago, this team did not know that they would even exist. Um, and here they are with the Daytona 500 win. And the way that things lined up, you go back to last year, and it was either them or Denny Hamlin were getting into victory lane last year when something was going on the legal side of things. And that continues over. I think somebody pointed out in the media center to Denny that every race winner this weekend was somebody that was involved in the lawsuit of some sorts. Richard Childress, of course, ended up being a big story in the lawsuit with his text messages. And what do we see? Austin Hill gets into victory lane in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race. And then, you had in the truck race on Friday, front row gets a victory of course, they were right there in the lawsuit as well. I mean, to me, like, you talk about putting stuff behind. There was a very telling moment in victory lane, Matt, when one of the very first people to greet Michael Jordan and congratulate him on this win was none other than Jim France, of all people. And then you see Ben Kennedy was there and Steve O'Donnell. And, I was listening to Denny Hamlin's podcast when I was driving back home yesterday. And he made it very clear we love this sport. We're here to stay. We're here to make it better. That this is water under the bridge, that we're ready to move on. And 2311 is going to play a significant role in this sport and promoting this sport. I don't know if healing is necessarily the right term for this, but Matt, it felt like a healing moment of sorts of them getting this win and everybody coming together.
I think healing is exactly the right terminology to use here. I think after the last year, really everybody's kind of been beat up throughout the lawsuit, and coming out the other side of it, I think everybody's just kind of ready to move on and move ahead and build the future of the sport together. I think that's the best case scenario that we could have been in, considering everything over the past 6, 8 months that has kind of come out and been dealt with in the courtroom. But I think overall we're in a pretty good spot moving forward, and I think that's a very telling healing moment, as you said.
Seeing Michael Jordan in victory lane, he is, in my opinion, the greatest basketball player of all time. Sorry, LeBron. And as big of a name as anybody in the world, right? Maybe second to Donald Trump and Barack Obama. I mean, like, that's how big of a deal Michael Jordan is. And, here's Michael Jordan, who I kind of have to remind people of this at times, Dom. He is so invested in this, like, he sold off his basketball team, his NBA team, the Charlotte Hornets. And he's at every, at every event for 2311. He's at the track more times than people realize. He's there a whole lot. I was hearing the other day that, he doesn't even own a team in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. And he spends his weekends watching almost every O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race just to get feedback and get ideas, for his cup team. And if you need any like insights of how real this is, one of the people that was pissed off that Rick Allen lost his job at NBC was none other than Michael Jordan. He told him, "You're the man." Like, why'd you lose your job here? What happened? So yes, he is very bought into this, and seeing him in victory lane, he said that he felt like he had won a championship here, and to me, I felt like that was a big moment for the sport. That you look at the last few years, Dom, especially with this lawsuit. Michael Jordan was there, but NASCAR didn't really know how to promote him, and they weren't really working with him. And they were ready to push this 2311 team off to the side and kick him out of the sport altogether. Mm-hmm. And now Michael Jordan, if he isn't already, is about to become one of the faces of this sport. And I thought that was a telling moment. The thing I said off the top, like, we look back at this sport, particularly in the Daytona 500, of some of the things that, come to mind, of some of those memorable moments. We think of, Steve Park winning at Rockingham and Kevin Harvick winning in Atlanta after Earnhardt died. And, of course, Dale Jr. winning the Pepsi 400 that year. Or, we think about Dale Jr.'s first Daytona 500 win. You know, I think about when Tony Stewart broke through and won at the Brickyard. I think what we saw with Tyler Reddick is one of those moments, and I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment here. I think this is going to be something we remember for a very long time. I would put there in that threshold where you remember where you were watching, because that felt like a breakthrough of just everything that's gone on with Michael Jordan being involved and being in victory lane and Tyler Reddick getting the job done. To me, that was something that I think when we talk about the montage and the clips of Daytona 500 history, that's right up there with him. And Michael Jordan's a big reason why.
I think you're right on that. And when you hear that off the top, well, you said, I'm like, okay, I know there's going to be a big point to this. And you're right, because it is a healing moment for the sport. We've moved past, we could argue, is one of the darkest chapters in NASCAR history, 2025, and the battles off the racetrack and in the courtroom. But you have Michael Jordan, who you now can promote. You have the face of NASCAR, one of the faces of NASCAR, like you said. You have the greatest basketball player of all time, which I agree with you, Tyler. Sorry, LeBron. Sorry, Kobe. MJ's the GOAT when it comes to the NBA. But you now have somebody who is in the sport that is all in with NASCAR. He grew up a NASCAR fan. He's a lifelong NASCAR fan. You want somebody like that is that much vested into your sport. And I want to ask you from a personal standpoint, Tyler. One of my favorite questions to ask a driver after they've had a breakthrough win or a great moment on the racetrack is to put in that perspective, like 50 years from now when you're in the rocking chair and you're thinking back on this race you just won. What are you going to remember most? For you, covering an event like this and being there and being immersed firsthand and giving a firsthand account and documenting history as it was happening, when you're in the rocking chair 50 years from now, what are you going to remember most about this Daytona 500?
For me, it's the win. I know that's the easy answer here, but it's Tyler Reddick. It's 23-11 after all the adversity, the turmoil they faced, and they get this win, and Michael Jordan's right there, and they're celebrating this like a sense of relief. The fact that they did not know what the future was going to hold and what their place would be. And now they're in as significant spot as they've ever been. Like, Matt, I would say this, that when you talk about the future with 23-11, with Tyler Reddick, Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, all that, this to me, I think when we get past the big three of Hendrick, Penske, and Joe Gibbs Racing, this team has the brightest future. And the driver lineup's going to change over time. We know they got a young up and comer and Corey Heim waiting in the wings, and he had a good run the Daytona 500. We'll see what happens with him. We don't know what Riley Herbst's future looks like. Of course, he was right up there in contention, had a good run on Sunday, but the resources are there. They're committed to this sport. You may not like the way that they go about things, the maverick approach that they've taken to NASCAR, but they're invested. They want to compete at a high level, and to me, I think that they're approaching this with an attitude of we're going to do this right, both on and off the track. We want to make the sport a better place, but we're going to do everything we can to compete at the highest level. I think they're, what is it now, 4 or 5 years in? I feel like they're really just getting started right now. Their best days are still ahead, Matt.
Yeah, honestly, I think I mostly agree with you. From the very start, I was listening to Sirius XM this week for a little bit, and I heard Justin Marks come on. I think he was talking to Moody and talking about how some people had compared them to at Trackhouse to 23-11, saying how they kind of came into the sport at the same time. They kind of got their first wins, it seemed like, around the same time, and kind of have grown at the same rate. Expanded to 3 cars and or 2 cars to 3 cars and whatnot, and have gotten to where they are today, kind of at the same rate. So I would kind of put Trackhouse in that conversation as a potential future for the sport as well. But I think with the kind of backing that 23-11 has and the support from Gibbs, I think there's no doubt that they are absolutely one of the top teams moving forward that you're going to have to watch out for.
Now, let's talk about the finish of this race. The way it unfolded. in the final seconds there, Dom. Uh, Riley Herbst has the run. He's pushing or pushing Tyler Reddick, and then he makes the move up to the top. And he said it was to give himself a chance, that he was going for the win. And Brad Keselowski hated it. He called it a dumbass move, was not happy about that. And that finish, Dom, like, I see where Brad's coming from. I understand his frustration because he's thinking that, hey, I just had a potential Daytona 500 win taken from me because I had an open lane at the top. We got a 3-4 white finish potentially. I understand where Brad's coming from, but at the same time, like Riley Herbst, it's the last lap. It's every man for himself. I don't blame him for what he did. Now, you know, maybe he should have gone to the bottom, but that's a split second decision. Like you got to go somewhere, and I can't blame him for going to win. So like I can see it's not, I promise you, this is not a cop out answer, but I understand where Brad's coming from, but I don't have a problem with what Riley did either. What say you?
Racing deal. It's a racing deal at the end of the day. And Matt, I love your perspective on this too as a driver because you're processing so many thoughts in tenths of a second. And it was probably twofold. I offer this without any proof, of course, but Riley Herbst wanting a chance at the Daytona 500, but also in those split second decisions that you're making behind the wheel, he's now behind Chase Elliott, and he doesn't want to give Chase Elliott a run and beat his own teammate to the start finish line. So I think, again, without any proof, I don't know if he had alluded to it or had mentioned any shortcomings with that, but you're not going to want to push a Chevrolet. If you're driving a Toyota Camry, you're not going to push a Chevy Camaro to the win, especially if it's your own teammates. You're going to go to the outside and kill that run that the 9 would have. Plus, he wants a shot at the win too. And did he know the 6 was coming? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he did talk more on those comments. I don't know and can't speak to that. But I figure, Matt, as a race car driver, you're processing all these thoughts in split-second decisions. I'm sure all of those things had something to do with what we saw in that final stretch, the final 2,000 feet of that race.
I think you guys bring up quite a few valid points. And to be honest with you, if they were running Xfinity cars, I would have more sympathy. But if you remember, they have these rear view cameras, and you can see pretty darn well out of them. I kind of have a hard time being too sympathetic to say that it wasn't on the 35. Like it was obviously on the 35, but I think I would have more sympathy if I felt like he definitely didn't see the 6 coming and just more of a lack of awareness. I think that's where Brad's frustration comes from in combination of like, Brad's worked his tail off this offseason just to get back and has a shot at the race that he honestly probably wants to win more than any other race. And to kind of get smoked there right at the very tail end, it's um, hard to take that one. But, uh, you know, I can absolutely see the points of trying to go for it. And hell, I'd probably pull out there. I mean, if I had a run, I think I would go for it. But at the same time, Denny even said in his I believe it was on his podcast that he Riley had hit the brakes a little bit to not hit the 9. So even then, that tells me he hesitated, and that didn't help his situation at all. So if you're going for the win, you can't hesitate. And I think the culmination of everything right there caused everything that happened.
It sure did. And you look, Tyler, too, and again, you were there. So if you're going to fill atmosphere more in the infield compared to most, and TV can't do justice on it, but the lead changed 4 times, 5 times in that last lap. And you have the crash off in turn 1. And the point I was alluding to at the top of the show, I think NASCAR got the call right on letting them race it out because we've seen one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. If the caution gets drawn too quick, well, they didn't let it play out. NASCAR was too reactive. Or if you don't let it, if you don't pull out the caution, rather, well, it could be a safety violation. I will say it is a big gamble to hold off and see how the cards fall, especially going off into turn 1. A lot of the drivers coming back by the start finish line are still going 200 miles an hour. That's a lot to get somebody to slow down by the time you get to turn 1. But the fact that NASCAR let that play out, I think it was a gamble, but I think it was a gamble that paid off. And it was also showing the consistency throughout the weekend because we had seen it where cars would spin out and NASCAR would let things play out before making the determination to call a caution flag. I think back to the dual race with Jimmy Johnson. There were consistent calls, Tyler. And I think that's the point I'm trying to drive at. NASCAR got the calls right by staying consistent.
And that's the key is consistency. We had this argument on this show last year where I said, Dom, that for me, I don't care the other if you call the cautions or if you let the race play out. I just want it to be consistent one way or the other. And there's a safety component to this, of course. I totally understand if NASCAR feels like they have to call caution in those circumstances and don't let them race back to the line. But whatever it may be, just be consistent. And from the dual race to the truck and O'Reilly Auto Parts to the Cup race, they were consistent all weekend long. And I think that's what most people felt was the same way, was they wanted consistency. And another point as well, I think it's interesting, is they had two separate race directors this weekend. So to kind of put it in like football terms, that's like having two different officiating crews for the weekend, and yet they still consistently called it the same. And so for me, I think that was a big deal for NASCAR to stay in that consistency, to take that approach. Now, will it be the same the rest of the season? I don't know. But we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And Matt, I would add another point to it. It's not just the end of these races. It's not like it's not like in football terms where they're swallowing the whistle at the end of the ball game and let them play it out. You go back to that whole Daytona 500, there was guys that spun out that they did not call a caution for either. They were out of the way or they got to pit road. This was not just an end of the game, end of the race situation. They were consistent with this all race long, and I give them credit for it.
Yeah, the consistency is absolutely key, as they say, but I think they did a really great job this weekend of staying consistent in terms of what we really need. Um, they've made all the right calls for an entertainment standpoint, I think. Obviously, if anybody would have taken a really hard hit, they were going to have to throw it. And I'll be honest with you, that last lap crash at the Daytona 500 was a little questionable, but
Gamble.
I mean, they let him go. I watched they didn't show many replays of it. I didn't feel like on the broadcast, but I saw some videos of it after, and I'm like, man, I can't believe they didn't actually throw it for that one. So, we're towing a line right there that makes me a little nervous, but everybody's been yelling and screaming about not throwing a caution. So, from an entertainment standpoint, I think it's the right decision. They made all the right decisions this weekend. They were towing a line with the safety standpoint, but we'll see what happens at Atlanta this upcoming weekend because I expect there to be some more of that.
Now let's talk about fuel saving. This has been a point of contention for NASCAR fans that are not happy with how much fuel saving has gone on. And I saw a stat today that Michael McDowell ran the most green flag laps of any driver ever in the Daytona 500 with the way that they save fuel. And the Spire cars, they have said, and I don't know if the math quite adds up on this, but they claim anyway, that had there not been the caution with 8 to go, that they would have won the race convincingly, that they would have stayed ahead of the field. And you look at it, McDowell and company, they were at one point running 25, 30%, on the gas at different points. Really just conserving that fuel. And you had the Toyota cars, of course, that were blocking, that slowed everybody down. And this has kind of changed over time, right? The Hendrick camp, Alan Gustafson figured this out first a few years ago of the fuel save mode and got that advantage. And then everybody else figured it out. And I don't see how you can go back and change it unless NASCAR wants to put in a rule, but I don't know how they enforce this of that you have to run 100%. I just don't see, now that we've already opened up the can of worms, that we're going to go backwards and change this. I don't see that happening. I think it is what it is. We're kind of just stuck with it at this point. Fans might not like it, but it's the nature of the beast. And, when these guys are running top speed, they're running, 47, 48. And you go back to that third stage, the final stage, and some people were upset because they're running 52s, 53s, that they had backed down that much. And you're saving throughout the entire race to make sure that last pit stop is as quick as possible to use the least amount of fuel you can, and then you just go for it, and everybody's running 100% at the very end of the race. I understand the frustration, but I just don't see how this changes now that these guys are doing this. And if you put some rules in place or try to work around it, they're going to try to figure something else out here, some workaround of sorts. And you watch the Indy 500 every year, and it's fuel mileage the entire race as well. This is not a new thing for big races here. I get why people are frustrated, but I think we're kind of just stuck with it at this point, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you hear it everywhere right now. Basically, everybody's saying you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? But, in this case, I'll tell you what we don't need is we don't need more rules telling the drivers how to drive. I feel like we already have too much of that. The WO line rule is kind of a borderline on that, to me at least. And I think that would, 100% rule for not saving fuel is just kind of an absurd, I don't know, seems absurd to me. It seems like it's a band-aid for different problems, like maybe we have too big of a fuel cell. I know we've got a larger fuel cell now than we had with the Gen 6 era. And then we have other things like stages that are affecting it, and then we don't have an incentive really to be up front and leading laps. So I always felt like that it was interesting that we took away the laps led points, the most laps led points. I think if you give a large sum of points to somebody for leading a lap or leading the most laps, you might solve that problem that way.
Yeah, maybe that's the potential solution to all this, but I would say just keep it as is. And there's another world too where if somebody is running 100%, if you get enough people to do that, then everybody else would be forced to do it too. So there's to me, I don't see how you can go back. I don't have a huge problem with it. I think we're just kind of stuck with it. And another point I'd bring up, Dom, is that super speedway racing in general, a lot of the appeal is for the casual fan, for people that were watching the Daytona 500 that don't watch every single week. And if you're a casual fan, you don't know any better. You don't know any difference between those cars running 5 seconds faster or 5 seconds slower here. And to me, like, as long as it's still entertaining, as long as it's still a good race, and I think this was a great race. We saw more lead changes than we've ever seen in the Daytona 500. I can live with this fuel saving strategy. What say you, Dom?
Oh, I'm with you guys 100%. Both of you guys, by the way, because the fuel mileage is part of the strategy that comes to NASCAR racing. In fact, I think that's one of the selling points. And I don't know about you guys, but my experience of talking to people who had never been to a race and they go for the first or second time, a lot of them are fascinated and intrigued by the different varying of strategies, pit road, fuel saving. That is absolutely a sticking point for many people that follow NASCAR for the first time. And for NASCAR to have to add something in to go and police something else on top of everything else they're trying to officiate during a race, it would be improper. It's unnecessary. Fuel mileage is just a part of the game. And like you said, Tyler, if they put in some sort of rule, they're just going to try to find some sort of way around that anyway. I don't think this is something, it's a non-issue, in my opinion.
I would think, kind of wrapping this up before we move on, guys, like, okay, you had the fuel saving thing, but everybody was playing within the rules. We didn't have any big penalties this weekend that occurred. And then, of course, NASCAR officiated things well. I think for the most part, Dom, we got out of this weekend without very much controversy. Like this, from an entertainment standpoint, a PR point of view, I think NASCAR's got to be feeling pretty well about themselves of how things unfolded this weekend.
Things unfolded great. You have great storylines. You have great momentum heading off into the next race week in Atlanta. I know I've said this a couple times already, but I'll just put a bow tie on it here. Michael Jordan and his team winning the Daytona 500. Guys, I've talked to people this week that don't follow NASCAR, and that was a sticking point. Like, oh yeah, Michael Jordan's car won. Michael Jordan had his hand in the Daytona 500 or in racing. So the casual people are talking about Daytona 500 and NASCAR racing. The casual sports fan, casual motorsports fan is also talking about it. So Great race weekend to put a bow tie on it.
Uh, Matt, I think we're coming out of this weekend with some real momentum here, with a great race, a great story, not any controversy. Um, people want to dog about the fuel saving thing, but I think we still got a great race out of it. I think there's a lot of momentum, and the race just itself. We talk another controversy. Brilliant move. Call of the year already by NASCAR to move the race up, to get this full race in from start to finish, green flag to checkered flag. To me, I think everything went about as well as it realistically could have, man.
Oh yeah, yeah, I think it did, and I'll kind of play on the other side of it because I know we don't have a whole lot of controversy, so NASCAR's pretty happy about that. But the sport was kind of built on controversy, so we need a little bit, right? I mean, I'd say there was one individual driver this weekend who kind of was the center of controversy, and I think every single race had some kind of controversy, whether it was the truck race, bringing out about three cautions, Xfinity, getting into it and getting yelled at after the race, and then getting wrecked at the end of the Cup race. I mean, I think old Carson Hocevar is bringing that little bit of chaos that we need, that NASCAR was built on, that controversy. So talking about the good kind of bad controversy, I think kind of brings my hot take of Hocevar is exactly what this sport needs right now, with bringing the controversy.
Matt, I've heard a lot of comparisons that Carson Hocevar and Dale Earnhardt in their early days have a lot of parallels. I'm curious if you see those parallels because I feel like I could see those. I see like there's a lot of rawness to Carson Hocevar and there's a lot of rawness to Dale Earnhardt in his early days. And I'm in no way comparing him to a seven-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, but I would say at least early Dale Earnhardt, early Carson Hocevar, I feel like there's parallels.
From an aggressive standpoint and being a racer and truly like doing it for the love of the game. And, I know he's got a lot of resources behind him and he always has, but, um, you know, he's got that drive that, that's what everybody I feel like is really, they're not comparing him to Dale Earnhardt. They're saying that he's got the same drive. I feel like that Dale had. Dale would have done anything to win races and be the best. And I think Hocevar's kind of got that same mindset, which he's always been really good, quite frankly. And I don't want to sit here and, um, you know, just give him props all day, but because there's a lot of things that he's done wrong and he's learned on the big stage. But I'll tell you a quick story. Back in the day, I was racing at Auto City Speedway on the same weekend that they were there. They had the biggest hauler and toter, so everybody was like, "Oh yeah, that they got lot of resources put into him and everything." And so I was watching his lap times. Um, I think it was Jeg CRA that was racing that weekend, and I was watching his lap times in practice, and man, that dude was so consistent. I mean, within hundredths every single lap of his previous lap, and I was like, he's got a lot of resources, but it takes something special to be able to put laps together that consistently. So, um, and that was actually almost 10 years ago now. So crazy to think, but he's got a lot going for him, and fortunately on and off the track with his comments towards Carson Ware now. I mean, he's got a lot going for him on the controversy front.
Real quick, Dom, when it comes to Carson Hocevar, he and Spire showed a lot of speed this weekend, and I know it's a drafting track and all, but the resources they've put in, their Hendrick Alliance and all, I came away very impressed with Spire Motorsports this weekend. I think this is going to be a big year, and I would be surprised if we're not talking about them getting into victory lane, specifically Carson Hocevar. He's got the contract extension. He's not going anywhere. This feels like the start of a big year for them.
You and I have talked about this too on the show over the years too, how what Spire Motorsports is building seems like what Furniture Row was building in the mid 2000s and the early 2010s. And it took some time for them to get their wheels under them. But once they did, they were fast everywhere. And Spire is getting to that point. Spire is not competing for championships right now, but every year is a step in the right direction. For Carson Hocevar to sign the long-term deal that he did, he sees something that clearly the public and most of us aren't going to have access to. So for somebody to stay and want to be part of a program they're building around him, and the resources that they're doing and the investment that Spire is doing into this sport, I see those parallels to furniture. I keep bringing that up because it's true. We're watching a championship team, a championship caliber team building in progress, and it's going to take time to get there. But Spire's getting a little better every year.
Let's look ahead to Atlanta here. Matt, I think the name that we start with Atlanta is the name that we started with last week at Daytona. William Byron has done so well at this place. He had a good car, was caught up in a couple accidents, and yet was still in contention with a shot to win this past week. I think everything, and we'll give our picks coming up later. I think it starts with that 24 Hendrick car, and then everything else follows after that. Maybe Blaney as well, but this is going to be something where I think it's not like Daytona-esque where everybody's got a shot, but I do think the upper echelon teams start to step up kind of a bit this week.
Well, you already saw it last year, the handling coming into play at Atlanta, and obviously when the cars start to need to handle well, the upper teams, the larger, well, better funded and teams that have better resources ultimately end up doing better because they have the means to be able to prepare for that kind of thing. So I think you definitely can expect more of that this weekend. I think Atlanta produced some of the best racing on the schedule last year, and I think we can expect more of that. But a team like Hendrick Motorsports, that 24 Byron, I mean, if the last couple of years have been any consolation, and obviously the 500, how they ran this year, I think they're going to have a great shot.
Dom, with this race, I think that um, you start to think about points to an extent. I think Kyle Busch certainly did that, falling back in the field and realized he wasn't going to get up front. And he's like, we'll just let the trouble happen and see where we go. I think you start to think about points a little bit with this Atlanta race, but it does feel like a mini Daytona in a sense. But then if you don't start well, I think really after Phoenix, Coda, of course, is going to be a whole nother wild card in its own right of being a road course. I think after Phoenix, if you are in a hole from these wild card races of these drafting tracks and then Coda, then you start to be in some big trouble here. Like this, to me, Atlanta, I feel like if you're a championship contending team, you cannot have a bad run if you had a bad run last week at Daytona. You can, if you finish top 15, top 20, you can live with that, but you cannot have two back-to-back DNFs or 30th place finishes in these drafting tracks. Like this still plays some importance even week 2 here with this new system.
Yeah, you still have 25 races till the chase returns, but that's 25 races. And if you're 2 races in the hole and you're way below the cutoff, you're going to have a big hole to try and dig yourself out of, because Atlanta and Daytona are wild cards. Stage points are going to matter. And we've seen in this format, pulling Jeremy Mayfield, where points matter and you need points at the last second to try and make the playoffs and make the chase. It is something we'll be talking about all year. And by the way, it was very refreshing too. I agree with the sentiment on X this weekend of not necessarily hearing so and so punch their ticket to the playoffs, but that the Daytona 500 really mattered with points, and Atlanta's going to matter with points. And we're going to see this theme of points return, this pre-2014 playoff era of how important points are with a hybrid of 2003. But Tyler, you're somebody like a Christopher Bell. You're Denny Hamlin, 9 or 8 points on the year. Yeah, we're 1 race in, but you didn't score stage points. You didn't pick up points in the duels. You might be looking at, okay, got to play a little safer at Atlanta. You're going to be trying to strive for some stage points.
Yeah. Matt, what do you think is going to be kind of the approach of these this week? Do they play things somewhat safer compared to Daytona, or is this going to be kind of like Daytona Part 2? How does when we talk about everything from the racing to the point side of things, like what's the approach you think for the most part?
I think you got to be aggressive. I mean, just like Dom was saying, the points are mattering a whole lot more now. And I mean, uh, you know, at Daytona, you can certainly gain a lot of spots in a short period of time. I think Atlanta is going to be a little different than that. I think track position is going to matter a lot more at Atlanta. So I think you're going to see guys being a lot more aggressive. And I think it's going to make for a really wild race, to be honest with you. And I think the stage points are going to be a really big deal for these teams, especially with the championship point. I mean, really between the win and stage points, that's another, what, 35, 45 points you can get over second if you win both stages in the race. I mean, that's that's a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. I was listening to Denny Hamlin talk this week and on his podcast, and one thing he was saying, Dom, was he doesn't think the champion is going to be below seventh place in the regular season points. That you're going to have to be seventh or higher. And he took it a step further. He said that he thinks that the champion is going to be within the top three of the regular season here. So you have something with this Atlanta race before that we didn't have in this prior system, where every week matters, which makes the unpredictability of this week, I think, actually makes this Atlanta race even more exciting than it was before.
Certainly, the points are going to matter more and more. And I remember Dale Earnhardt Jr. saying on his podcast maybe a year or two ago how a lot of these young drivers don't know what it's like to blow an engine somewhere early in the year and just know the impact that that had on your season. He was talking, of course, of the Winston Cup era of points. And we kind of have that again now, where a wreck, a mechanical failure, something that's going to take you out of contention of especially if you're a race winning team, this is going to hurt a lot more because the seating is going to matter, and there's no stage points that turn into playoff points that you add to your seating or race. You get what you get after 26 races, and the consistency is going to be rewarded. Now, in theory, someone who's 14th or 15th in that seating could go out and win 3 or 4 races and automatically be a championship contender. But pulling a Tony Stewart, a 2011 Tony Stewart, that is, in this system is going to be very tough to do so in the era of stage racing. I would agree with that sentiment. Whoever wins the championship is going to be seated in that upper half.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see how it all plays out, but going to be fascinating to see how it unfolds here in 2026. Guys, let's get to our news and notes, our top headlines in the sport. Dom, where are we going to start this week?
Let's start with the 7-time champion and another announcement of what some of his final racing plans in the NASCAR Cup Series are going to be. Tyler, you were there for this, so I look forward to your insight on that press conference. But Jimmie Johnson, 7-time NASCAR champion, announced that the 2027 Daytona 500 will in fact be his last and final NASCAR Cup Series start. Johnson, who raced in the Daytona 500 this past weekend, has one more scheduled start at the San Diego race on Father's Day weekend in June. And the Daytona 527 will be his final start. So there's 2 more confirmed starts. He said he's leaving the door open for other NASCAR series, so Xfinity and truck starts could be on the table. And he does have truck races coming up too. Or O'Reilly, there we go, $5 in the jar for that. But Tyler, what was the sentiment with that, with the media? Does this really feel like this is the last hurrah? Because we've seen drivers do this before. He did this in 2020. He did come back, but does this really feel like this is the final race for Jimmie?
This feels the end for Jimmie. I believe him when he says that next year's Daytona 500 is his last. I thought it would have been cool if his last race would have been the San Diego Street Course, either this year or next year, a homecoming, first race in his hometown. I thought that would have been a cool way to go out, but I don't blame him for wanting to go out in the Daytona 500. And it's kind of wild when you think of it, guys. Like there's been when we talk about guys doing these one-off races or coming back on a part-time schedule, a lot of them avoid Daytona as their part-time schedule race. Like they don't want anything to do with these plate tracks and super speedway races. Tony Stewart, who ran in that truck race and he crashed out. He was saying that his wife told him like, why are you doing that? Why are you running the truck race at Daytona when you have a 75% chance of crashing in that race? She looked at him like he was crazy, but he said it's a unique opportunity with Ram making its debut with Colleague Racing, who's Ram Stellantis has been good to him, and he wanted to be a part of that, and so there's something special about Daytona. But I think that with Jimmie stepping aside with this isn't, I don't think anyone is surprised by this at all. And honestly, some people might not like this opinion, but you look at Legacy Motor Club and they got a ton of money themselves, private equity and a few other things involved. They have not run up to the standard of what they're spending. that team has greatly underperformed across the board. When you look at Eric Jones, who I think is a talented race car driver, and he finished 24th in points last year. When you look at John Hunter Nemechek, who could be out of that ride at the end of this year, the this here's where I'm going at this, folks. Jimmy Johnson, that 84 car, yeah, he ran third in last year's Daytona 500, but he's done so bad in these part-time stints, and not always his fault. Most of the time, not his fault. I think that's been kind of a distraction, honestly, for the rest of the Legacy Motor Club. I could argue it's held that team back of committing the resources they need of their full-time teams. And next year they're adding a third car, a charter that they're getting from Rick Ware that's currently with RFK Racing right now. They need to cross their T's and dot their I's and put their best foot forward. And I don't think that 84 car is doing much help for them. I love Jimmy. He's the best to ever do it. It's been fantastic seeing him every time he gets in a race car. But Matt, I think this is for the best for Jimmy and this organization to say enough's enough. We gotta pull the plug on this.
Yeah, and as a lifelong Jimmy Johnson fan, I honestly I hate to say I agree, but if there was a time for it to happen, it's probably a pretty good time, to be honest with you. And um, I felt like he retired too soon in 2020. I felt like he had more time left. I think he could have stayed for another couple years, and obviously that team that he left ended up winning the championship the following year. Granted, they had Kyle Larson, but I was like, well, the cars they make a difference there, right? I wish he would have stuck around longer there, but I digress. He essentially he had a great career, and I think going out in the Daytona 500 and really on his terms is and not because a sponsor left him or something like that, right? And obviously having a long-term plan to focus on the team in the future, I think is going to be an exciting change, I would imagine for him, and I'm excited to see how that goes.
Dom, what's kind of your thoughts on Jimmy here hanging it up after next year's Daytona 500? I'm with you of what he's talking about. Of hey, we could see him in other series very well. I wouldn't surprise me to see him running O'Reilly or trucks or maybe even IndyCar. Maybe he runs another Indy 500 or something, but full time. But running at the Cup level, it's probably time.
And he did say the IndyCar door was closed. I do remember that. But the O'Reilly and the truck door seemed somewhat open. Yeah, it's time. It's time. And it really sucks, I think, when you look at professional athletes and when they become a shell of their former selves. Look at Brett Favre's a great example. My favorite all-time NFL quarterback, but his last year in Minnesota was one to forget. And Jimmy Johnson, I think he even mentioned in that presser, Tyler, how he looks back at it now and okay, he knew he was not going to be competitive hopping in a car at Kansas. And we were there at Texas a couple years ago, and he just competed in the back half of the field, Las Vegas. I think the drive is still there. He's still got the mind and the mental sharpness, but your skill set just declines the older you get. Father Time's undefeated when it comes to these deals. And a last hurrah, like he said, to have a chance to win in your final race. The super speeder races tend to kind of be the equalizer. And at least we will see him, in theory, competitive in his final race.
Yeah, we'll see. And we know he'll be in the field. He can get the provisional like he did this past year, too. So we'll see what happens. What else we got down?
Well, the status quo is staying. And what I mean by the status quo is the internal combustion engine is going nowhere for the time being with NASCAR. So NASCAR, and looking at its manufacturers and its relationships with all the different OEMs, the consensus around the country, Tyler, seems to be that fans and racing enthusiasts and vehicle enthusiasts like the internal combustion engine. NASCAR's flirted with the idea of electric vehicles, and we've had tests even as recent as last year with the Phoenix car. Martinsville, David Reagan's been the driver, but it seems like there's a commitment more so towards alternate fuels in the sport for the time being, and leaving the sound and the loudness and the roarness of engines, that ear-piercingly loud sound of the engines intact in NASCAR.
So there's a couple thoughts I have on this. One, the NASCAR had that test they did with the electric vehicle, and even just testing it and throwing out there was so much backlash that I think people said no, like they openly rejected it. And there was discussions about the O'Reilly series becoming an electric series. The manufacturers were pushing that, and I do not see that happening. I could see, an electric car having, some select number of race exhibition races of sorts, or maybe creating a fourth series with electric cars, but that is never going to be in one of the top three series. And alternative fuels and all that, I get that. You got to be proactive, just like when they brought in American ethanol. I understand where they're coming from. Now, here's the other point that I would make on this. Um, to me, I think about kind of big picture, this aligns with expanding the manufacturers. When I was down in Daytona weekend, all the talk was about Dodge, and there is momentum for them to move up the cup in 2027. We know about Ram, their partner with Stellantis, making their debut in the Truck Series this past week, and Minnie Tyrell running that Google uh, Ram Chevy in the ARCA series. That was something. But they're invested and they're spending a ton of money. And I think, Matt, with when you're talking about new manufacturers coming in, and Dodge might not be the only one. There's been talks about Honda. You can't really change much. You can't be in the process of changing things while trying to bring manufacturers in. Like Dodge, they're playing catch up. They're trying to get teams signed and trying to get, figure out the cars and testing and all that. Like, to me, I know some people don't like this next gen car and they want to make some changes and all that. I think a lot of that gets put on hold for now while we potentially usher in a new manufacturer too. And I think the momentum's there that we're going to see Dodge probably with colleague and another team or two in 2027, Matt.
I definitely think it's possible. Um, be optimistic to be 27, but I definitely think it's possible. Where there's a will, there's a way, and there's definitely a will. So you just never know. But in terms of kind of the direction of everything, I could see us going to a hybrid component long before we ever go fully electric for any of the series, to be honest with you. I think if anything they would and I'm just completely speculating, but I would imagine that they would start a completely separate electric series if they were really thinking about going that direction. And then I don't know. I think with what we're doing right now, potentially bringing in some kind of hybrid component, but I don't ever see it. Even that, I don't foresee that happening in the near future by any means.
Dom, what's kind of your thoughts on all this?
The hybrid option seems like that's going to be more realistic before we have any kind of electric series take full force. And while I don't agree with you, Tyler, in saying it would never happen in Xfinity or truck, I do think it's a long way off.
O'Reilly.
That's $10 in the jar now, $5 every time. That's twice now.
I've been trying not to say it because I just know.
Yeah.
I just know I'm gonna miss it.
I could be
one
like
of these
Tyler,
times.
call the show "Let's Go Racing," but that's
I did do that last week. I have not done that
Fair
today.
enough.
Knock on wood. There's still more of this show left to go.
But a
But
hybrid option seems like that's probably going to be more the push. And I feel like the alternative fuels, you're kind of already seeing it move in that direction. But when a majority of your fan base still likes the loud internal combustion engine, I just don't see that changing, not even the next decade, Tyler. I could see this being maybe a generation from now, 20 years from now, where there is an electric full-time series at some point. It is the future. And as we know with technology, businesses either adapt or get left behind. And NASCAR is really proving they don't want to get left behind. So it sounds like they're open, but the door is not wide open right now for this. Plus, the fan base isn't behind this, so you're going to listen to your fans.
Hey, I'll
yeah,
tell you, I'm gonna be perfectly fine with a hybrid component as long as it sounds like the Cadillac GTP and that they're running in IMSA.
yeah.
That thing is wonderful.
Well, and people point to F1 and the success of Formula E. Well, F1 fans and NASCAR fans, there's not a ton of crossover like that. Those
Very
type of
different
fans are
markets.
much more accepting and much more likely to drive an electric vehicle than NASCAR fans are. Now, the Dodge thing of Dodge moving over and going cup racing in 2027. What I also found interesting, another nugget I got for you from this weekend, Dom, was that all the manufacturers actually seem to be embracing the idea for manufacturer joining the sport, that they feel like that's going to make them stronger. Competition makes people better. Iron sharpens iron. Um, you know, there'll be some, in theory, some Cup teams that likely shift from their current manufacturers over to a Dodge if they were to move over. But to me, I found that interesting to hear that these manufacturers actually encouraging that they seem to be excited about the competition that Dodge could potentially bring.
And you said it best. Competition breeds competition. You're going to have the best rise to the top, and it's going to make everyone better at the end of the day.
Yeah. Um, Dom, the odds this weekend, how are they looking for Atlanta?
If you guys had to guess, who are the favorites to take it all at Atlanta before a lap's been turned on the racetrack?
I go Byron and Blaney and probably around plus 800.
I'll take Logano this week.
We have some hybrid elements here. You both would be correct. Joe Logano and Ryan Blaney are your odds-on favorites at plus 800 or 8-1 before a lap has been turned on the
I
racetrack.
got the number nailed.
You did get the number nailed, and then Kemp just got
I
the
wasn't even
tap on
trying.
that. Yeah,
I wasn't even trying.
It was hybrid. It was hybrid there. Austin Cindric comes in at third with the third shortest odds at 10-1 or plus 1,000. Chase Elliott, heartbreaking Daytona last week at 12-1. The defending or most recent Atlanta winner. Kyle Larson, 14-1. Kyle Busch, William Byron, Brad Keselowski, each coming in at 15-1. Denny Hamlin at 16-1. Last year's winner of this Atlanta race, or EchoPark race, I should say. I've been getting those sponsors wrong, by the way. Todd's $15. Christopher Bell
It'll
coming
always be Atlanta Motor Speedway.
Fair enough.
No free ads for EchoPark.
Sears Point, Lowe's. We just got to just mix them all up. Chase Briscoe, Chris Buescher,
Jeff Gordon's Raceway.
Jeff Gordon Raceway.
I've always called Phoenix that ever since.
Yes. How can you get that not out of your head, right?
Right.
Along with Bubba Wallace, 22-1, Alex Bowman, 25-1, Ross Chastain, Carson Hocevar, and Ryan Preece each at 30-1. And then towards the bottom of the list, by the way, we have 38 cars on the entry list, so everyone's going to make the field. Ty Dillon, Riley Herbst, and Cody Ware each coming in at 80-1, and BJ McLeod and JJ Ailey, your two open cars, each at 100-1.
All right. Let's make some picks. I am going with the guy I talked about, William Byron. Didn't three-peat at Daytona. Still has never happened in the Great American Race, but I was impressed. He's run well at this place before. I think he gets the job done, and William Byron gets his first win in 2026. Dom, who do you got?
We're going with a bunch of past champions, I guess, or just one, since we've only had one race. But I mentioned him last week. I mentioned it's going to be a rebound year, and he's going to be playoff bound in 2026. He ditches the cane in victory lane. Brad Keselowski gets it done at Atlanta.
Chase bound.
Very nice. Very nice. I was gonna pick Bad Brad. I really thought about it. I still got a feeling. I'm with you, Dom. We're feeling Brad this year. I know Tyler's not thinking Brad's gonna have a good year, but I'm with you. I think he's gonna win at least.
By the way, Tyler's the guy that said Joey Logano was going to win a points race, and he won the dual race last week and was the points leader after dual one.
Okay.
Didn't even make it a race.
We'll call it a regular season points full races. There we
Now
go.
we're moving
There's the amendment.
post.
Yeah, it's too late, I'm afraid.
Oh, yeah. Well, shit.
I will say it's a technicality, I think, but
Okay, yeah.
and to be fair, when you look at the point standings, I'm going to play devil's advocate for you here. If you look at the point standings, there's no number one in the wins column for Joey Logano. So, just saying. Anyway,
he won a heat race, guys.
Yeah. Well, if we'd have had those at the Clash, maybe he would have got it then.
Yeah, maybe so. Who wins, Matt?
I'm trying to push it off as long as I can because I'll be honest with you, this is really hard this week, but I think I'm gonna go with another Roush car. I'm gonna say, Chris Buescher gets it done.
Chris
Okay.
Buescher. I have to ask you too, real quick, Matt, because you've been really high on him, and I know he's run really well, and he almost won this race last year. Carson Hocevar, how do you think he does this weekend?
Well, this could be the weekend he breaks through. It was kind of the race that he lost by just a little bit last year, so who knows? Maybe I think he'll be aggressive. He's either gonna win or put it in the fence. We'll see what happens. Either way, he's bringing some controversy.
Yeah. Love to see it. Around the room real quick. What's everybody got going on this week? Dom, starting with you.
Yeah, I'll be home here in New Mexico and good family time. And yeah, looking forward to spending a nice quality weekend at home and looking forward to getting back on the road here real soon to go cover some NASCAR in person.
How about you, Matt?
Doing more of the same, man. Working hard for that next opportunity. That's about it.
I'm at home this weekend. I'm glad to be sleeping in my own bed. It was worth the 16 and a half hours to do so. But Dom and I will see each other very, very soon at a Coda and Phoenix back-to-back weekend. So certainly looking forward to that being three of the first four races of the year. So that'll be cool.
Okay.
Make sure, folks, to subscribe to the Racing Roundtable on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review or don't leave us one at all. Hit us up on all social media platforms as well. And check out the Studio Soapbox Network, this show, the Jones Report, Coach Bo Knows podcast, and all podcast platforms. And we appreciate you all being here with us. We'll put the checkered flag out on this edition of the Racing Roundtable. And we will see you right back here next week. For Matt Kemp, Dominic Aragon, I'm Tyler Jones saying so long. Have a great one, everybody.